In this lesson, I'm going to discuss properties of objects. For the purpose of doing this, I've created a very simple sample form in Microsoft Access. It contains a label, a text box, and a command button. Now, hopefully you learned this in your Introduction to Microsoft Access course. To get the properties of any object in Access, you click on the Property Sheet icon, and that opens up the property sheet. Now notice I didn't have one of those three objects selected. What was selected was the overall form. The form itself is an object in Access and has some of its own properties. So these are the properties. They're divided into 4 different categories. Properties that define the format or the look and feel of that particular object. Properties that define the data as it's displayed or as it's processed or as it's handled by that particular object. The different events that can be triggered by this object, and any other miscellaneous type of properties. The All tab puts them all together. Now, unfortunately, you'll notice the All does not alphabetize them when it does this. So it can be a little tough to use the All tab to find things. So as you get comfortable with properties and know which category it falls under, it's best to use one of those 4 tabs, because finding things in All can be a little time consuming. Now, every object in Access has various properties, but they don't all have the same properties. Let's look at the format classification here. These are the properties that handles the format of a form. Notice we've got things like caption, default view, picture, whether to auto center or auto resize this particular form when it appears, whether it should fit the screen, things like that. If I click on the text box, it's got different properties. That fit to screen, oops, is gone. Same as the auto resize and things like that. It's got other properties, like the format of the data as it appears, whether this field is visible to the user or not, how many decimal places it has, its height, its width, its top location, left location. That, by the way, is the offset from the upper left corner. It's in inches. So objects have different properties. They all have one in common, and that's the name. Every single object in Microsoft Access has to have a name. And as you may recall, when you took your Introduction to Microsoft Access course, every object must have a unique name. But all the other properties could be different. And it does base, the properties that you receive are based on the type of object. In other words, the properties for a text box are all the same no matter how many text boxes you've got there. The properties for a command button are all the same no matter how many command buttons. But the properties of a command button are different than a list box, because the properties are defined based on what is needed for that particular object. As we go through this course, you'll be seeing more and more of the different objects, the different properties, and so forth. One final thing to understand, and we'll get into this more in depth later in this course when we talk about working with these objects and actually being able to create and define your own. There is what's called a hierarchy to objects. That means these 3 objects on this form have a parent object, an object which they are related to as being either contained within that parent or have aspects of that parent that they themselves have adapted. These are all on the same form, so their parent object is the form. The form itself has a parent, which is all of the forms that are in this Microsoft Access application, put together as a set or a collection. We'll discuss collections in more detail later on in this course. The collection of forms has a parent object, which is the application itself. And that is the highest level object in a Microsoft Access application, is the application itself. Every single object in the application is a child or a sub-object of that particular object. And that's important to understand because if you're starting at a particular level, say at the base application level, you need to know that hierarchy because to get from the application object to the set of forms to the specific form you want to the particular object on the form, you need to follow a particular line of referencing, which we will get into in a later section of this unit, of how to reference and be able to tell the application, the VBA code that you are writing, how to find the particular value of a property that you're interested in.